Hello again, Gills fans. Welcome back to what is pretty much a bonus edition of Gills in the Blood TV. That rest that I keep promising myself never seems to happen. But in the last couple of hours, the Gills have announced Mark Bonner as their new first team manager, not head coach like Stephen Clements's predecessor was. So, to tell me everything I need to know and how successful we may be is, of course, EFL guru and general nice bloke, Gabe Sutton. Gabe, welcome.
Hi, Matt. Lovely to be on. Thanks for having me. Look forward to chatting about Mark Bonner's Gillingham.
Yes, that's the new name, I suppose. Is that like Frank Lampard's Derby, or
Maybe
only
Mark
time will
Bonner's
tell?
Gillingham might not quite get
Doesn't
the
roll
same
off the
ring
tongue quite, does
on
it?
Sky
But
Sports. Yeah.
it might do. It might do if we start winning a few more football matches. And obviously, Sky Sports is the new home of EFL action from next season. Little plug for them. Right, obviously, let's talk about Mark Bonner. 38 years of age, born 23rd of November 1985. His background is essentially Cambridge United, aside from one small spell coaching in the academy at Southend United at the start of the millennium. It is all under the Abbey Stand, to quote a famous podcast who will be helping us out indirectly this evening. 2011, Gaby was appointed Cambridge United reserve team manager. 2018, he was stepped up to first team coach as part of Sean Derry's backroom team. Then had two caretaker spells in charge in 2018 and 2020, and the second led to him getting the job on a permanent basis at the end of the curtailed COVID season. Talk to me, Mark Bonner.
Yeah, well, I think what you're getting first of all is someone who builds teams that tend to be very balanced. I think he's capable of handling lots of different situations and either maximizing different advantages or on the other way, sort of negating different challenges, if you like. He's a very flexible, adaptable manager, I would say, who likes a balance about his sides. And I know that's a bit of a tame answer because sometimes people want what is a Mark Bonner style of play? And I genuinely think he is a little bit on the sort of the balance side of the spectrum. And you might say a little bit conservative at times, but I would probably say sensible and balanced. But I think that's probably helps Gillingham from a point of view of I look at some of the promoted sides in League Two in recent years, especially the sides that have had the bigger budgets. This season, you would say Stockport and Wrexham have been really efficient, excuse me, and really ruthless. So Stockport have been a really well-oiled machine that have been able to adapt to different challenges. They've had lots of different injuries. And then Wrexham, they've not necessarily blown people away as a footballing entity, but whenever they've come forward, they've been ruthless and threatening. And I think that's probably the way Mark Bonner's going to be looking to build this Gillingham side, and hopefully for you can do that.
Yeah, just to jump in, obviously two words that have probably not been associated with Gillingham for the best part of 3 seasons: ruthless and threatening and efficient, especially in front of goal. Unfortunately, it's been nice to see if Mark can come in and sort out them problems, because that is essentially what has held us back over the last 3 seasons, going back to the relegation out of League One back in 2022. I've written down a few questions before we look at his numbers and his statistics and his honours
Sure.
and that type of thing. A good fit for Gills. This was one question that I did ask Under the Abbey Stand via social media platform X. They came back and said, if given time, he will build something, may not be immediate, but he will create a unity within his teams. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, well, I think he creates a really good culture from based on his work at Cambridge. I don't think you either meet or massively exceed expectation for in each of your full 3 seasons in charge if you don't create a really good working culture. And I think that's what he's done at Cambridge. I think he's a very authentic leader, Matt. So there was a time in the second half of the 22-23 season where they'd had a really bad first half of the campaign and some of their key players had dropped off. And well, actually, they started that season really well and then they sort of plummeted down the league. But what was I going to come on to? I think he sort of made a few crucial sort of tweaks in January, and then there was a period where the performances did lift because of some of the changes that he made in formation and personnel. But the results weren't quite coming at that point. In fact, they didn't quite come until April that season from an improvement from around January. And what I really sort of admired about that was the way that he stayed true to himself, and you could see clips of him sort of having a bit of a laugh with his players and creating sort of a really relaxed and calm environment where, they recognize what's in front of them and what they've got to do, but not in a way that's sort of panicked. And I think that shows he's a real true modern leader.
Mhm.
And I really like that aspect of his management. So I think in terms of creating a strong working culture, I think it's a fantastic appointment.
Essentially, there you mentioned like sort of relationship with players, and I get all managers, head coaches, whatever they want to be called these days, have relationships with their players. But I think one thing for me that Stephen Clements perhaps failed in, if that's the right word, was I just thought, and I understand it because it was his first gig as a number one. But I've been very vocal, and I've said it recently on Gills in the pub with a couple of Gills fans that I felt like he was a number one, a number two in number one's trousers. He never came across to me as a natural first team manager, a natural number one. On the odd occasion that Robbie Stockdale did the press conferences, I thought there was more about Robbie. I just think there were bits of Stephen Clements that where he could have made quick gains with the fan base in terms of, I get not everyone likes the fist bumps at the end of games, but he had opportunities to sort of create that bond between us and him. And I just thought he turned it down very early. It might not be in his personality, which is understandable. What can we expect in terms of character from Mark Bonner? Is he quite animated on the touchline? You've mentioned he's calm and he likes to build a culture and he's quite balanced with his approach. But in terms of his demeanour on the touchline, what can we expect?
Well, I'm going to touch on that point a little bit, Matt, because the important thing for me in managers is authenticity. So I absolutely love Jurgen Klopp or Pete Wild, fist pump and really giving it to the fans,
Mhm.
and I do love to see that. Don't get me
Yeah, we
wrong.
enjoyed it when Neil
Um,
Harris was here. Absolutely.
yeah, exactly. Neil Harris was great for that kind of thing. At the same time, I always feel like it's got to come from an authentic place
Mhm.
and it's got to be true to you. And I think what was interesting for me about Mark Bonner, where I interviewed with him when he was Cambridge United manager, one thing that really surprised me was he said, I'm not a fan anymore. And I think his sort of rationale for that was that you can't be too emotional as a manager. You've got
Mhm.
to be very level-headed and
Of
really
course.
focused on the thing that's in front of you. So I wouldn't expect him to be um, super animated on the touchline because I think he likes to be focused on what's in front of him. And to be honest, I think I respect that in a way more than if he went for the sort of cheap wins, if you like, and just tried to sort of appease the fans, if you like, by giving them what he thought they wanted, kind of thing. But at the same time, I think
I
while I
mean
think
more just in
sorry,
general
go
at
on.
ends of games. Like, is he like I get game faces on during the game. So
Yeah,
that was more a general question. But I think just in terms of even when we'd won games and played fairly well, there just never seemed to be a bond between Stephen Clements and the fan base. He was
sure. I think
very
what I would
reserved in
say to
everything that he did.
Yeah, what I would say to that, do you know, I don't know if I've ever been at Mark Bonner's game because I've never been to the Abbey, so I don't know if I've ever seen whether he does a fist pump at the end of matches or not. So I'm not 100% sure
Okay.
on that. He might do, he might not. But what I would say is that I think there's more than one way of creating a bond.
Mhm.
And one thing I really do like about Mark is that he is very open and he does offer media opportunities, and he seems to be quite a personable person that you can sort of approach in the same way that other managers I've come across in the game probably wouldn't have given me the time of day because they'd
Excellent.
just they'd seen me. So I think he creates bonds. Whether he does that in the sort of passionate fist bumpy way, maybe he does a bit of that, but I think there's more than one way you can do it.
Oh, absolutely. It was just something that was very
Yeah,
sort of
sure,
obvious
sure.
to us as a fan base. And I suppose it's because you've gone from Neil Harris, who was very much an extrovert,
Mm.
as opposed to what Stephen Clements was. And it might have been that he was aware that he didn't want to just be a clone of Neil Harris potentially
Yeah.
as well. But he's gone now. It was just something that I thought I'd ask. In terms of systems, though, there's been a lot of talk. I spoke to Under the Abbey again on this one, and he just said in League Two they were flexible between 4-4-2 variations, which was either inverted wingers or a version of a diamond.
Yeah.
Um, is that something that you can reiterate as well?
Yeah, I think probably not worth getting too bogged down with formations when it comes to Mark Bonner, Matt, because in his first full season at Cambridge,
Mhm.
they were able to sign Wes Hoolahan, who's obviously an international footballer, albeit he
Mhm.
was 39, 38 when he signed. But he's such a creative mind and turned out to be so instrumental in their promotion season that they had to design a system that would get around him. And I think that's where I would say it's a strength of Mark Bonner, that he can adapt to what he has. What I was talking about at the beginning, where there's certain advantages. You've got Wes Hoolahan, build around him rather than say, oh, I only play 4-3-3, so Wes Hoolahan isn't going to fit into a three-man midfield sort of thing.
Of course, yeah.
So I think he's got that flexibility to build different teams in relation to what's available. And I think the interesting thing that I'm curious to see with him at Gillingham is, now that he has got certain financial resources, that he can be more selective, and he can sort of get a Wes Hoolahan type based on resources as opposed to geographical convenience. It's going to be interesting to see how does he design a team a bit more from with a blank sheet of paper and with more resources. So I think that's going to be really interesting. But yeah, in terms of the formations he's used, those two versions of 4-4-2, I remember the 4-4-2 diamond in the promotion season.
Mhm.
And then the following year, when Paul Mullin was poached by Wrexham, he switched to 4-2-3-1 to give his sides a bit more balance for League One. And then midway through the promotion season, I think he switched from 4-2-3-1 to 5-2-3 for the insurance of the extra centre back to give them that bit more solidity. And whenever he's made those crucial formation changes, responding to circumstance, they've tended to have worked. So I think, again, I come back to it. He's a really flexible, adaptable manager.
Sounds promising in terms of someone that's thinking on his feet throughout games as well, rather than just sticking relentlessly to something because he thinks it's going to work from kickoff. You mentioned Wes Hoolahan, and obviously it was a name that Under the Abbey Stand mentioned as well. I think the words they used were cheat code in League Two. Essentially, he was just too good for the level, and you sometimes come across a player like that. Do we have potentially a Wes Hoolahan in our ranks that can play that creative role? Then we have some creative. That was, I mean, the two that first came to mind would be Johnny Williams, or if you can keep him fit, George Lapsley, depending on what happens over
Johnny
the summer.
Williams, Matt.
The veteran Johnny Williams, yeah, at 30 years of age, and Wes Hoolahan was still tearing up League Two at 38 and 39. So, who do we see within the current? I know Gills haven't released their retained list yet, so it could change in an hour, it could change tomorrow, it could change at the end of the week when the retained list comes out and we find out who's either been released or is made available for transfer, and invariably that will happen. But do we have, who do you see from the current squad that potentially thrives the most in a Mark Bonner team?
Well, I think he'll be looking to maintain some strong defensive foundations. So I would look at, I would think the spine looks pretty strong, Matt, in terms of you got Connor Masterson there, you got Shadowgi there. I think there's another really good centre back who's yeah, Max Amer, exactly. So you've got three really good centre backs there, and I'm sure that's going to be part of the defensive foundations that Mark will be looking to build from. And then you've got Ethan Coleman, who's going to provide that solidity. And then, yeah, I think there's the basis there of a really strong spine, especially if you can get Josh Andrews fit and firing next season. So hopefully those can really thrive. But again, I think it's going to be he's very much a manager that likes to adapt to his situations. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what it looks like.
Yeah, just at first glance of the player list that I'm looking at on my phone, obviously it seems that there's a fair few pieces of the jigsaw that might already be in place and just need tweaking rather than changing. But of course, understand.
I've got a thought that Mike, I'd like to discuss with you. What about Timothy Dieng, Matt? Because he came in he was Player of the Year, I think, at Exeter when they won promotion from this level in 21-22. Do we think Mark Bonner could get the best out of him?
I think Tim Dieng was probably one of our best players over the last month or so of the season. He had the odd game where you thought, oh, he just, but who didn't in that Gillingham? It was just frustrating to watch. But yeah, I think if you look at his numbers over the last couple of months, winner against Wrexham, goal at Salford sealed the game, equaliser at Morecambe, we won the game. Yeah, there was some important goals scored at Mansfield last away day of the season. Free kick against Donny on the final day. So Timmy, I think, was just sort of running into some form and was probably one player that didn't want the season to end because he had that quite nasty knee injury at the start of September at Grimsby and missed a month or two. So I think he's one that was probably thinking, oh, we could have just done with the season going on a bit longer. So it'd be interesting to see where we play Timmy, because I've always thought he can do that sort of box-to-box role.
Yeah.
He's very good at doing both sides. But also, if you want to go a bit more direct and you play one up top, you can almost cheat and play him as the 10 and just
Well,
allow him
what
and
he did, it's a great point, Matt. And what he did at Exeter was, because they had a really strong right side in their promotion season,
Mhm.
there were times where the ball would come back to Josh Key as their right back or right wing back. And he would sort of swing in across, and Tim Dieng would get in at the back stick and use his physicality to break forward from midfield, and sort of get those headers in. So I think there's that possibility as well, that bit more directness of movement, and then that you might even create more space for someone like Ethan Coleman because of Dieng making those runs and the power and the attention that he's going to command. So I think that could be a really interesting one to watch.
And you talk about right side, obviously Ramo Hutton, statistically one of the best in the division from right fullback or right wing back. And if we could persuade certain Mr. Mahoney to maybe come back on a permanent basis, that would give us a very decent
Mm.
right hand side at the level as well. So
Do you
plenty
think
of
they could
work to
get,
do.
so I'm sort of reversing presenter roles a little bit here, Matt, but do you
Absolutely
think
fine. You do it all the
um
time.
do you think you will get Mahoney back
I think
permanently?
it'd be tough. I'd love
Right.
to have him back. Obviously, and I know he's that type of player, almost like, not at the same level, but like David Ginola used to be at Tottenham and Newcastle. There's just going to be 60 minutes of the game. He might not touch the ball, but it's the bits where he does touch the ball that he can go and win you a football match on his own. He's good with both feet. He can get to the byline. He can come inside. You can't have too many good players. And I think, he's championship level or certainly top end League One. You can get him back in League Two. Similar to when we had this chat about Jordan Graham a couple of years ago, I'd imagine. So it'd be one. But I suppose what's against us is the fact that he's had a decent season. I think it was 14 goal contributions in a side that didn't score many. So that sort of emphasises or almost exaggerates his numbers. The fact that his family are based in Blackburn as well. And the fact that League One clubs might be sniffing around makes it difficult. But he'd certainly be one that I'd be doing all I could to get him back in. But we shall see, and we shall leave that to the people that are the experts at trying to do that. Style of play we've sort of touched on. Under the
Sure.
Abbey Stand said they were certainly more attacking in League Two. It became fairly attritional, certainly in the latter part of his reign in League One. Because you look at that first season in League One, and it was a very good campaign. 14th, I think, was a brilliant
Yeah.
step up, and it sort of carried on that momentum. Considering the standard of League One now, it's a very good division.
Sure.
But he said that could have been squad budget related because Cambridge were a very small fish in a pretty big pond in League One. So
Yeah,
how do you
well,
see?
I think just if I can just jump in on that,
Of
Matt.
course you can.
I think part of it might have been that what they recruited were players in his last couple of seasons
Mhm.
were players who are a little bit injury prone. So I think they signed Sully Kaikai and Fahiri Okanabiri,
Mhm.
and players that had a recent history of injuries. And I think when you're Cambridge United in League One with a bottom six budget, um, you've probably got to get your signings right, and they've got to really make a contribution to your first 11. And I think they had, whether it's a bit of bad luck with that or whether they could have maybe selected a little bit differently in terms of the recruitment, possibly. So I think that's going to be important. But I think there's a little bit more room for error maybe with Gillingham because you've got that financial support.
Exciting times ahead. Right, numbers wise, before we start wrapping this up, 2021 obviously was when Mark Bonner made his name. 46 played, he won 24 games in that season as they got promoted out of League Two behind only Bolton. And then we've mentioned the second season, the first one, sorry, in League One, they finished 14th, which I thought was very commendable in a very strong league at the time.
Sure.
In fact, that was the season that we went the other way and we dropped out of League One. Still won 15 games, which was no mean feat in that division at the time. But obviously 22, 23, and then the start of this past season up until his sacking on the 29th of November, I think obviously proved to be a little bit more difficult. You've touched on it a little bit. Why did it become more difficult the final sort of 18 months for Mark Bonner and Cambridge? Again, I'm assuming budget has a part to play. You've mentioned
Yeah.
injuries and that. And is there a case to say that maybe Mark Bonner had taken Cambridge as far as he could? Everyone has a ceiling, every club, every individual, every player.
Yeah, it's a great question. I definitely think there's an extent to which Neil Harris coming in. You've used that example of the fist pumping energy that Neil Harris brings.
Mhm.
A different style of leadership, and there is part of me that wonders whether a new voice and something a bit different was something that Cambridge maybe benefited at that particular time. Because sometimes, certainly in modern football, after 3 or 4 years there is a case where sometimes players however good the manager is, they don't necessarily want to listen to the same person every day. So whether that was one component of it, I
Mhm.
would say possibly. And I don't think that has to be a slight on Mark Bonner necessarily. I think part of it was budget, like you say, and part of it was in terms of availability and freshness, and maybe didn't have all the options he would have wanted to switch things up when they got into that bit of a rut after starting the 20 this season in pretty good form. So yeah, I think there's probably a mix of things, but I think if you take his spell as a whole, I think he's had a fantastic start to his career as a manager. I think on balance, and yeah, I'm excited to see where he can go.
Yeah, I think I am too as well. Excited. Yeah, cautiously optimistic in terms of where we can be next season. I know you don't like to give anything away, and we're very early in the summer, and you do a lot
Sure.
of your League Two predictions, League One predictions, Championship predictions, but just initial thoughts. Where does a Mark Bonner Gillingham potentially finish next season in what looks like a much more open League Two, and dare I say, a bit of an easier League Two, given that we've lost Wrexham, we've lost
Mm.
Stockport, we've lost Mansfield. You're going to lose one of
Maybe MK Dons. Yeah.
MK. I was going to say, yeah, you'd say Crew are likely to stay now. Will they be as good next season?
Mm.
But yeah, you could lose MK Dons. I think the two teams coming up, no disrespect to Chesterfield and Bromley, great achievements, but are they going to be as strong as the team that came up last season? The four that are coming down from League
Mm.
One don't scare me too much in terms of Fleetwood, Carlisle, Cheltenham, Port Vale.
I think
So yeah,
Carlisle will probably have a top three budget, but I agree with you in general.
so where do we see a ballpark figure? I'm not going to say
Sure.
you're going to
Yeah,
put.
of
I'm not asking
course.
you to know your sale to the master or whatever the saying is, but where do you see a Mark Bonner Gillingham potentially being in and around 24, 25?
So I would say that I'm not sure that I can see a Mark Bonner side becoming the most memorable league team in League Two history
Hmm.
because I don't think there's enough of a stylistic extremism in terms of super attacking football. So I can't see a Mark Bonner side getting 100 plus points at this level. I
Hmm.
know that's high bar. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe he does completely tear it up, but I'm not sure that it'll be sort of a team that really takes the league by storm
Hmm.
necessarily and gets 100 plus points.
But do we
Um,
have? Do we need to be that team this season
but
based on what we've just
I
said about the division?
Sure, but I think this definitely increases the likelihood that Mark Bonner, Gillingham get into the top seven and possibly push towards 80 points, maybe 90 points next season, because I think that there's less of a likelihood that maybe things go wrong because he is very good at problem solving. And his side will be so sort of balanced. And I think when you've got the individual quality that Gillingham can afford, maybe that sort of style of management will sort of work out favourably. So yeah, I think it's certainly an appointment that increases Gillingham's chances of making sure they don't have some of the mistakes that they've maybe made last season. And yeah, I think there's a good chance he'll finish in the top seven.
In terms of it could be a case of Mark Bonner could take Gillingham to the next level, but at the same time, it could be Gillingham in terms of budget and stature could take Mark Bonner to the next level as well.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point as well, because I think at Cambridge he got into League One, had a great first season, but I always think the second season's harder because you rely so much more on your recruitment because your best players from the promotion season they'll either get poached if they're young, or they might decline a little bit on if
Mhm.
they're on the older side, or sometimes you tend to need freshening up by the second season, and that's where the recruitment becomes crucial. And if you've not got much of a budget, you've got a little bit less room for error, and that can make it a bit harder. And that probably explains why Cambridge had struggled in that second and third season.
Like you said,
Whereas
with
if you could
Okanabire and Kai and that type of play,
exactly, yeah. So if
you're
you
taking more risks, aren't you? I think.
so I think if you can get it right, if you can get it right in the at Gillingham, then I think there's more potential in terms of League One if you can get there.
Gabe, as always, appreciate the info, appreciate the knowledge, and appreciate your time mostly.
Cheers, Matt. Thank you so much.
Gills fans, if you're still watching, Cambridge fans, you may be watching. Thank you very much. If you've got this far, then we do appreciate it. As always, we are on the road to 3,200 subscribers now. So please consider hitting that like button. Please consider following Gabe if you're not already, which I'm sure you are. We'll put his details in the description at the bottom of the video. And please keep telling everybody about us. Yeah, interesting times and a crucial few weeks ahead for the Gills, you think, with the retained list likely to be coming out soon. And then Mark Bonner will be getting to work in earnest in terms of recruitment for an assault on the League Two title season. Gabe has already said 80 to 90 points. So if we don't make it, you can come and blame him this time next year. As always, thanks for watching. And until next time, up the Gills.